want to apologize for that last video there. Had some complications with connection and whatnot. But allow me to just go over again. The last video will be taken down, of course, so we'll restart from the top. So sit back and enjoy. As I mentioned, this video will be edited out later for better quality, and just kind of cut out a little bit of miscellaneous and such. Anyway, let us begin. My name is Amadeus Aeon. I was born and raised in the far eastern nation of Ulthod. My parents are Brer Amadeus Aeon and Mikasa Tsukishiro. Sorry for the stutter there. I grew up in a small village far off the coast of Yansha. It was a small and not very populated village, but it was nonetheless home to me and my family. Growing up, I grew up within the occupation of the Garleans, who had begun to slowly but surely begin building and taking a bit of control, or what you would say a power status, in the nation of Ulthod. Because of this, my parents feared for my safety and that I would be forced into military service or forced to be taken, like many other children have, to study and become part of the Empire. So to avoid this detection, I was given my name, Amadeus Aeon, an Eorzean name of sorts. And they did this so that I would be safe, and so that I wouldn't be recognized as a full Doman. With that in mind, my father was indeed an Eorzean, hence the name Brer Amadeus Aeon. So I took after his name so that I would have safety from the Garlean Empire's recruitment. We didn't live too far off from Doma, and in fact, me and my parents would often visit Doma on occasion, because that is where my grandmother lived. And so we would often go there to take trips to Doma and visit her. It was peaceful in these times, and Doma was a very, very beautiful city. In Doma, I would often play with some of the children there of Doma, and made quite a few friends. One of them, which was a Genin, or a shinobi in training, His name was Oburo. And we'd often hang out whenever I'd visit my grandmother. Life was pretty simple as it got. There wasn't really too much going on that which we really needed to worry about, or what I should say, what we were aware of. Little did we know the Garleans were plotting something secret behind our backs. And it was only later that we realized it was too late to stop. But aside from that, I had a fairly normal childhood and grew up living a pretty normal life. That is, until the day my father Brer disappeared suddenly one day. Leaving and abandoning me and my mother in our small village. My mother wasn't much the same, you see, after my father had left. She was somehow, I'd say, a little bit sad. So I would try my best to help her out as much as I could, as any good son would. I got a job working at the docks as sort of a fisherman's hand. I would help the fisherman handle his wares and sell them off. My mother was very proud of me and very happy to see that I wasn't letting my father's disappearance bother me too badly. But deep beneath the surface, it was actually something that I had wanted to know about for quite a long time. I was quite young when my father disappeared. And before that, I would have these strange dreams in my sleep. They were dreams of a large crystal floating in a very peculiar, very unknown space. This crystal was beautiful beyond imagining and towering very high. I could hear what I believed were words, but I couldn't make them out. And then the dream would often escalate to a fiery landscape surrounded with strange machines and a battlefield of sorts. And from the sky of the battlefield there was a great dragon breathing fire and causing mayhem across the land. I wasn't sure what it meant and thought nothing of it. However, my parents were both concerned about these dreams that I'd keep having occur over and over again. So, in order to help me alleviate the stress of these horrible dreams, they took me to go see a shaman in the Azim Steep. However, upon going over the shaman's ritual, he confessed that he found nothing wrong with me and that I was a normal child. Yet my parents were still not convinced, so they had asked the shaman for some medicine to help me sleep at night. And I would often be taking this medicine almost every night. It wasn't until my father left, however, that the dreams had ceased to come about. And so it would make me even curious if he was connected somehow to these dreams, these visions of a towering crystal and of the dragon. It bothered me very much so, and I desperately wanted to know. So, in secret without my mother knowing, I began working with my job. I'd been saving money to plan a trip to go find my father's whereabouts, and to also ask him why he abandoned me and my mother. So I'd saved up for years. I would say probably about a total of 6 years I'd saved up the money that I'd worked for so I could be able to travel out across this land and the sea. I did not wish to let my mother know, however, as being as sad as she had already been that father wasn't there. I didn't want to further break her heart by saying that I was leaving as well. So instead, I'd left a letter. I'd wrote a letter, rather. I'd left it for her to find. However, as I was on my way out of the house, she had come to stop me and noticed that I was leaving. I was stunned and very speechless. I couldn't speak a word, for I was afraid that she would begin to break in tears as I'd left home. But rather she said, "You're going too, aren't you?" I still remained silent. I knew you would one day go as well after your father. Or perhaps, rather, I thought you wouldn't follow in his path. For a mother cares deeply about her son. I had closed my eyes and slowly turned around to face her. Do not be troubled, my boy. Your father also wanted you to one day leave this land that we live in. Mother, she had stopped me to speak, and I went to the cabinet next to the stove and pulled out a journal. And then she handed it to me. This belonged to your father once. In it he wrote stories of all his adventures that he'd gone on back in his home of Eorzea. When you were old enough, he wanted you to have it. But I believe you are ready for it now, as seeing as though you're going off with him, after him, correct? I just slowly nodded my head as she'd said so. She had readied a satchel for me with food and water so that I wouldn't go hungry on my travels. And also, she gave me some blades, a set of blades, which she said belonged to my father. I'm going to find him, Mother. I promise you this. She nods silently. I know you will, my son. I know that you will. Be safe and have a good journey. I gave my mother one last look and hugged her before leaving. I'd used one of my fisherman's boss's contacts to find a skipper to head out of our village and set a course for Yansha. Here in Yansha, I was looking about for ways to get to Eorzea, for I believed that is where my father had gone. And looking through his journal briefly, I had discovered that he had mentioned a crystal, much like the one I'd seen in my dreams, to which origins he'd said lied within Eorzea. So I would make inquiries around Yansha's small settlements, asking around and looking for ways to get there, to Eorzea. My traveling had taken me to a small village. Which was very close to Doma. This village was called Namai. It was here that I rested for a time. And the people of this village were very generous and very kind people, very prosperous. Though they confessed that they did not really know much of my father, I did find a traveling bandwagon here, so which was a foreign merchant who had traveled through various territories, seeking profit and fame. I had questions for this merchant, and I'd asked him if he knew of a way in which I could seek passage to Eorzea. I was quite in luck, he had said, and that he knew of a method to get to Eorzea, one that was not guaranteed for safety, but a method nonetheless that would indeed endeavor to get me there. He said I would first need to travel across the Ruby Sea, a sea which is notoriously known for its pirate faction there. A faction which believed that the seas were freedom and all theirs for the taking. But also within this Ruby Sea, it was shared with these beast-like men with shells on their backs, the Kojin. He had told me the Kojin were an industrious lot, and that they valued very many sacred treasures and such. He said that I might be able to seek some passage if I were to find a treasure worthy enough for the Kojin to allow me safe passage. And so I pondered for a moment what I could do to find this treasure. Humble fishing village known as Isari. It was in this tavern that I had been asking around for some work. To my luck, there had been a pirate captain seeking extra deckhands in search of a very, very rare treasure hoard that is beneath the Ruby Sea. And so I pledged myself to help this pirate captain seek his treasure in the Ruby Sea. He had searched far and wide. For our trouble, it took about a year before we finally discovered where this location of this treasure would be. It was revealed by a Kojin emissary that the treasure we seek lie deep within the trench. The turquoise trench. So we set course a sail and headed towards the turquoise trench in search of this treasure. An unexpected encounter had occurred, however, as we reached our destination. The Kojin with the red shells did not like us digging around, especially for treasures which they said were sacred and belonged to the kami. The captain was not willing to abide, however, by some mere superstition. And so, he had flung one of his bullets right at one of the Kojin, thus creating a conflict. Meanwhile, I was ordered to dive into the trench and search for the treasure while they kept the Kojin busy. It was a very shallow and very deep trench. As I was searching around, I happened to notice this very big palace underwater. It was beyond belief that such a thing existed, and I had heard stories from sailors, but I'd never believed it until I'd seen it with my own eyes. I was beginning to lose breath, however, and that's when I noticed the shining treasure pieces that my employer was looking for. So diving down into the depths, I hurried and grabbed as much as I could get. And then quickly swam back up to the surface. Once I have rendezvoused with the captain, we agreed to meet far off towards the tower near Rasen Seikyo. The captain was very pleased about the plunder I had brought back. Very pleased. And in fact wanted to offer me a spot on his crew. However, I had to turn him down and insisted to him that I was merely looking for a way to get to Kugane. He bellowed a deep and loud laugh. But rest assured to me that he knew of a fellow who could definitely get me into Kugane safely. So he marked a place on my map with which I could meet this man. Apparently, this man that I had to meet was very famously known to smuggle people in and out of the ruby scene. Now, the Confederacy that was being established at the time didn't really mind this much, for they were too busy with their own problems at sea. So I was able to securely get passage to the entrance to Kugane. From Kugane, however, I was left to my own devices once more. And so I set about asking around still for passage to Eorzea, as well as if anyone has heard rumors of my father. I had searched for days and nights in Kugane for something, anything that could lead me to Eorzea. But nothing was coming up, and I feared I would lost my track and would have to return home empty-handed. My asking around, however, led to some trouble, and I was detained by the Sekisei-guni, which was the local enforcement of Kugane. They had found out, of course, that I was smuggled into Kugane illegally, and so I was taken to their barracks. They said in order for me to clear my crime, I would have to secure the payment for the fee of the violation of their town. Needless to say, this fee was very steep indeed. More than what I had saved up all those years back for this trip. They said if I couldn't afford the fee, then I might be facing execution if judged by their lord. Fearing that my journey was about to take a turn for the worst, a figure appeared to my rescue. What appeared to be a woman, dressed in fine raiments and silk. The locals knew her as the owner of the pleasure house within Kugane. She had offered to pay for my sentence. Lost my train of thought there. Forgive me. She had offered to pay my sentence in exchange that I'd work for her under a contract of at least 1 year. I was skeptical, of course, of what this contract would imply, being that she's known to operate a pleasure house, of all things. But she had assured me that it was not very difficult work, nor was it very strenuous. And so, having no other alternative, I accepted her offer. She had introduced herself as Lady Shiokaze. Lady Shiokaze was most generous and always respectful toward her employees. Not so some of her customers, that is to say, however. For if any of the customers got violent, she would of course throw them out after having humiliated them in the process. The tasks which she would have me, however, were varied. Sometimes my task would involve a bit of mercenary work, seeing as though she noticed the blades I had strapped to my waists. And along with that mercenary work, I would also be required to do some general maintenance and some work to keep the pleasure house up and running. Now, seeing as though my debt was quite high, I couldn't do this forever, I realized, and so I asked Lady Shiokaze if there was any other way, any work I could do to possibly speed up the process, for I didn't want to spend forever here in Kugane. I was eagerly and desperately wanting to find my way to Eorzea and find my father. So, with that in mind, she gave me a different kind of job. One that was very less modest. And essentially, I would be doing some not very clean or rather friendly work either. If one can read between the lines that this is a pleasure house that I'm working at, then you kind of get what I mean. It was by all means not a very enjoyable line of work, to say the least. But now I could understand the other workers' sentiments and their feelings. So after about a month of doing this rather indecent job type of work, I was finally able to work off my debt to Shiokaze. As a nice farewell present, Lady Shiokaze gave me transcript of passage across the seas, to which I presented this transcript at the docks. The course of which we were set was for the port city of Limsa Lomensa. It was definitely a long journey sailing across the sea to Limsa Lomensa. On the journey there was a slight implication though. A very, very thick fog had arisen on our travel, which made the seas unnavigatable for the captain. So, with that in mind, we were forced to seek refuge at a nearby island, which a sailor who was also along the ship was able to identify for the captain. This island, however, was not deemed a safe place by any means, and some on the below the deck suggested it was a cursed island, besieged by pirates in the long pirate age. Along this ship I had noticed there were two queer-looking Elizim who appeared to be very young. I'd wondered about these two characters and what made them set off on such a journey. I'd happened to notice the two sneaking off at night on the island, and had elected out of curiosity to follow them. The watchman had suggested I use caution when traversing this island, this mysterious island. To my dismay, friends have gotten themselves in a bit of a bind on this island. They were attacked by a creature which had emerged from the sands. I had swiftly moved into action to assist them. Once the creature was dispatched, they introduced themselves as Alfino and Alizé Levieur, and said that they were fellow traveling scholars headed toward the lands of Eorzea in search of what they called etheric disturbances. This stuff was all news to me, however. It is definitely something foreign to my prior knowledge as a traveler and adventurer. I didn't really understand it all, but they assured me that their intentions were not without a good cause. And so we headed back to the ship together. The next day, with the fog cleared, we had sailed and finally arrived in the port city of Limsolomensa. I had looked around this port city, exploring it. A fellow decked in yellow uniform approached me, however, and called me an adventurer and suggested that I head to the upper decks and speak with a man known as Badaron. So having taken this advice, I headed up towards the deck and spoke to this man, Badaron. Almost immediately, Badaron also called me an adventurer and welcomed me to his humble tavern. He had told me that Limsolomensa was filled with pirates of all kinds, and most importantly of a couple military factions, the Maelstrom, and then the officer faction, the Yellow Jackets, which was the man who directed me here, was part of. Apologies for that. I had to check a setting of sorts. I had learned much of Limsa and of Eorzea from this man, Baderon. However, when I brought up my name, he looked pale as a ghost. I had wondered if I said something that might have offended the man. However, he assured me it was not the case, but rather that him and my father knew each other quite well. And now, looking back, I remember when I was reading through the journal on the journey, it did mention, Father did mention that he had lived in Limsa for quite a long time. And so, I asked Mr. Baderon if he knew of where my father was. He had shook his head and told me he had not seen my father since 5 years ago, which was when he left me and my mother. He had told me that my father had joined this circle of knowing in an effort to help preserve Eorzea and push the Garleans out of Eorzea. But similarly, Baderon told me my father was known to possess a special gift of sorts. The details were fuzzy in his head, he said, but he said this gift gave him an immunity of sorts. There was something very curious to me, and I wasn't sure what to make of it. Baderon, being a very generous man, also directed my feet to a guild, which he said could teach me skills to survive in Eorzea. He said unlike the typical guild, however, that this guild was a bit of a secret. But nonetheless, they would definitely teach me all I needed to know. And in fact, it was a guild that my father was a part of. This guild, which is called the Dutiful Sisters of Limsa. I had skimmed through my father's journal once more to see if there was any mention of it. It was a bit vague, but he did mention the sisters, which I assumed he was referring to this guild. This guild which was filled with rogues. As I'd enter this enclave, they were quite reluctant to take me in. For it seems that they don't just take any normal adventurer who happens to wish to join their motley crew, as they called it. So I told them of my father, Brer Amadeus Aeon. Their faces were aghast at the name, to which one of the rogues said, "Eh? You bloody mean to say you're related to the Brer Amadeus Aeon?" I nodded in kind and said yes, the very same. Bloody hells. I never thought to hear that dang name again. Daft old sod that he was. With that in mind, they summoned their group leader, a man known as Jack. Jack came storming out onto the scene. Me. Man is I most certainly did not know of where my father had gone, and it was because of this that I'd sought out on my journey from the beginning. For I was seeking answers of the truth of why he disappeared, and why I had these dreams. Jack had revealed to me that he had known my father since he was a boy, and that his father was very influential within Limsa. With him and my father going way back, he agreed to train me and teach me all that he knew of blade work as well as of Eorzea. It was a long and arduous path, training in the Rogues Guild and learning my way around Limsa and Lenosia. Along the side, of course, I had also done some basic work for Baderon as well. I'd begun to slowly earn a small name for myself in this port city of Limsa. Which, of course, some passerbys would mention that the name Aeon was coming back to Limsa once again. Thank you for watching this segment on my lore video. I shall be continuing another later on, possibly tomorrow. So please tune in and look forward to that. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like or comment below. If you enjoy my channel, feel free to subscribe. And thank you for watching once again. Have a wonderful day, evening, or night, whichever the case may be, and we'll see you next time.